Stop killing games. This has been a hot button topic for a while now, with an initiative started by the YouTuber Ross Scott that was essentially targeted at trying to keep video games alive past the time that the developers, the publishers of the video game are supporting it. When this initially came out, I thought about talking about it. I thought about discussing it and decided not to, because a lot of the discussion around it had devolved into just like a flame war between, different popular creators and whatnot. And I just didn't want to, it seemed like it was more about drama at the time than I really wanted to get into. But a recent comment has asked me to talk about this issue, and kind of it made me think that, yeah, maybe I should. On that note, I am going to, as much as possible, avoid discussing the drama related to it. I'm just going to discuss the initiative, explain it from the best of my understanding, and say my take on the initiative. Normally, I don't block any comments. Normally, I don't delete any comments in my comment section unless they are directly hateful, which usually YouTube auto moderator does automatically. So if you have posted a comment and you saw it and get deleted or not appear, I didn't do that. That was YouTube's moderation did that automatically. But on this note, I am going to moderate the comments in the comment section if they devolve into any sort of drama about he said, she said, this content creator said this, this content creator said that, just because that's not what this needs to be about. What this needs to be about is the initiative itself, and not who said what, and is this person a jerkbag for saying this thing. It needs to be about the initiative itself. This conversation needs to be about the initiative itself. So, what is the Stop Killing Games initiative? Reading directly from the website. Stop Killing Games is a consumer movement started to challenge the legality of publishers destroying video games they have sold to customers. An increasing number of video games are sold effectively as goods with no stated expiration date, but designed to be completely unplayable as soon as support from the publisher ends. This practice is a form of planned obsolescence and is not only detrimental to customers, but makes preservation effectively impossible. Furthermore, the legality of this practice is largely untested in many countries. Over the past year, we have successfully escalated complaints on this problem to consumer agencies in France, Germany, and Australia, and have brought forth petitions for new law on this problem to various countries. A list of the actions taken to date can be viewed here, and it's going to be go to the website if you want to click it, which is just stopkillinggames.com. As of 2025, most consumer actions on this matter has concluded, and we are awaiting decisions on it from several governments. However, there are a few remaining avenues left where people can participate if they are eligible. I almost choked my own spit there for a second. And the big one that is still eligible right now is the European Citizens Initiative. Now, to quickly explain what the European Citizens Initiative is, and I'll go over this in more detail at the end of the video, what the European Citizens Initiative is and why this actually matters, is the European Citizens Initiative, unlike something like Change.org that my current petition is running on, the European Citizens Initiative actually gets a response from lawmakers. If enough signatures are achieved and the leader of the initiative, the person running the initiative, does the right steps afterwards, it actually gets a direct response from the lawmakers, from the legislators, which makes this more important. So, real quick, let's go over. As the petition states, on the Citizens TAC Initiative.europa.eu website, objectives. This initiative calls to require publishers that sell or license video games to consumers in the European Union or related features and assets sold for video games they operate to leave said video games in a functional, playable state. Specifically, the initiative seeks to prevent the remote disabling of video games by the publishers before providing reasonable means to continue functioning of said video games without the involvement from the side of the publisher. The initiative does not seek to acquire ownership of said video games, associated intellectual rights, or monetization rights. Neither does it expect the publisher to provide resources for the said video game once they discontinue it while leaving it in a reasonably functional, playable state. Basically, what that is saying is the initiative is seeking to require game publishers to not be able to make the game unplayable. Effectively, if a game is some sort of live service game that requires you to connect to the internet or connect to some sort of online asset in order to play the game, it wants to require them to change that once the game's like end of life is happening. Once the game is no longer being hosted by the developer, to make it so that there is not some method that is blocking people from continuing to play it. It no longer has to connect to the internet. It no longer has to connect to some server or some client or something that allows the game to be playable. Quick personal note for this. I love the game Fable 3. Fable 3 is such a fun game, such a beautiful game, such a part of my childhood. I don't have an Xbox anymore, so I can't play it on Xbox, so I ended up trying to see if I can find it on Steam. I couldn't find it on Steam, but I did go on Amazon and find a Steam code to download the game. So I bought the Steam code on Amazon, downloaded the game, it was able to get access to the game on Steam by using that Steam code, downloaded the game, only to find out that the game is no longer... It used to be playable on PC, but is no longer playable on PC because the game requires access to a service that Xbox is no longer supporting. So I can't play that game. And I looked up 1,000 ways to work around it, but all of them were complicated and none of them really seem to want to work anymore. So now I own and was able to purchase a game that I can no longer play because it requires access to this thing that they're not supporting, and they did nothing to make it so it no longer requires access to that. So think of that. That is a game that does not require you to be online at all, can no longer play it because Xbox decided to not support that function anymore and start supporting a different software like Game Pass, but didn't translate the stuff around so that now Fable 3 can just access like Game Pass and other Xbox software in order to play the game on PC. On to the annex of this petition. And I'm going to go through this like step by step and try to explain what it means to the best of my understanding. Annex. Video games have grown into an industry with billions of customers worth hundreds of billions of euros. During this time, a specific business practice in the industry has been slowly emerging that is not only an insult on basic consumer rights, but is destroying the medium itself. An increasing number of publishers are selling video games that are required to connect through the internet to the game publisher or phone home to function. While this is not a problem in itself, when support ends for these types of games, very often publishers simply sever the connection necessary for the game to function, proceed to destroy all working copies of the game, and implement extensive measures to prevent the customer from pairing the game in any way. Essentially, if you have any sort of live service game or any game that requires you to connect to the internet or connect to a home server in order to access the game, you can't do that anymore a lot of times once the game's end of life has happened, once the publisher decides to no longer support the game. This practice is effectively robbing customers of their purchases and making restoration impossible. Besides being an affront on consumer rights, video games themselves are unique creative works. Like film or music, one cannot be simply substituted with another. By destroying them, it represents a creative loss for everyone involved and erases history in ways not possible in other mediums. Effectively, this is saying is, you are purchasing something. You are purchasing the right to play a game. You're purchasing that thing, and then they are taking that away from you without providing you a way to restore it, without providing you a way to continue play it, simply because they no longer want to support it. Existing laws and consumer agencies are ill-prepared to protect customers against this practice. The ability for a company to destroy an item it has already sold to the customer long after the fact is not something that normally occurs in other industries. With license agreements required to simply run the game, many existing consumer protections are circumvented. This practice challenges the concept of ownership itself, where the customer is left with nothing after buying a game. Essentially, and this has been ruled on in previous cases, if I bought a car, if I bought a Chevrolet Silverado, which is not a car, it's a truck, either way, if I bought a Chevy Silverado, and after owning it for a few years, Chevy sent out something to the computer chip that helps the car run, that basically disables the car, everyone would agree that is wrong. That is not okay, that should be illegal, that they should not be able to rob me of my purchase. If I bought a hammer, and I bought a Craftsman hammer, and Craftsman had a chip in that hammer that after a certain amount of time, after they decided they didn't like that hammer being in use anymore, it disassembled the hammer somehow, Everyone would agree that that is BS, that you shouldn't be allowed to do that. But game companies are getting around some of those laws by saying that they are issuing a license to the game, that you're not buying the game, that you are buying a license to the game, which is ridiculous, especially since they no longer sell hard copies of games. Even when I bought a game, I bought Horizon Forbidden West as the steel case version of it, expecting to get a disc that would allow me to play the game. I got a download code that effectively meant I purchased a license to the game. And this concept of being able to license games is how they circumvent a lot of stuff. There's a part of it that they can argue it's for protective purposes, because if it's an online multiplayer game and someone is repeatedly seen hacking and cheating at the game, now that you only purchase a license for the game, they can ban you from the game without consequence. But one, just have that as a thing in the EULA. Let's not get into EULAs too much. But two, if it's a single-player game, why is that still the case? We wish to invoke Article 17, Section 1 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. No one may be deprived of his or her possessions except in the public interest and in cases and under the conditions provided for by law, subject to fair compensation being paid in good time for their loss. This practice deprives European citizens of their property by making it so that they lose access to the product an indeterminate arbitrary amount of time after the point of sale. We wish to see this remedied at the core of this initiative. Basically, there is a law that states that I need to feed myself. There's a law that states that a consumer cannot be illegally deprived of a purchase unless they are fairly compensated or unless there is a legal reason to deprive them of the purchase. And effectively what is happening here is that consumers are being deprived of their purchase, but what game manufacturers and game publishers are saying is, oh, well, all you bought was a license, and we're just taking that license. To be fair, I still bought the license. That is the sum write-up of the annex, and it's fine that that might need more definition and more explanation because of the way that ECI works, and I will get into that at the end of the video. But before we do that, we're going to go over the FAQ that is on the website to kind of explain some of the questions here. How are publishers destroying video games? An increasing number of video games are designed to rely on a server the publisher controls in order for the game to function. This acts as a lifeline to the game. When the publisher decides to turn this off, it is essentially cutting off life support to the game, making it completely inoperable for customers. Companies that do this often intentionally prevent people from repairing the game, also by withholding vital components. When this happens, the game is destroyed because no one can ever operate it again. Live service games, games that require you to connect to the internet to play it, connect to some server to play it, when that server is no longer available, the game is no longer playable. That's it. Why should people care about publishers destroying video games? Well, video games are primarily just for entertainment and not of much consequence. The practice of a seller destroying the product someone has already paid for represents a radical assault on consumer rights and even the concept of ownership itself. If this practice does not stop, it may be codified into law and spread to other products of more importance over time, such as agricultural equipment, educational products, medical devices, etc. It is important consumers maintain a basic level of rights so as to not be overrun by predatory practices. Additionally, video games are unique creative works. The concept of destroying every existing copy of a book, song, film, etc. would be considered a cultural loss for society. While a less recognized medium, video games still deserve to have basic protections against the complete and willful destruction of many of its works. So one, it's talking about this could create a snowball effect where now the concept of licensing something and destroying it once it's no longer making you money, once you no longer want to support it, so that consumers can't continue to use it, could spread to other products, and it could use the fact that video games do it and are getting away with it as a basis for why they are allowed to. This has also been fought before with the fact that Apple was specifically told by the European Union that they can no longer do that planned obsolescence thing where they were sending out updates to older iPhones that made them less effective, that made them not work as well, so that you would be encouraged to buy a new iPhone. And they were told, no, you can't do that anymore. So it falls within that same kind of line, except for in this case, it's not even making the product less effective. It's making it entirely unusable. How is this campaign going to save video games? If companies face penalties for destroying copies of games they have sold, that is very likely to start curbing this behavior. If a company is forced to allow customers to retain their games in even one country, implementing those fixes worldwide becomes a trivial issue for them. So if destroying a game you paid for becomes illegal in France, companies that patch the game would likely apply the same patch to the games worldwide. An analogy to this process is how ACCC in Australia forced Valve to offer refunds on Steam, so Valve ended up offering them to people worldwide as a result. Also, the European Union is a big consumer base. So a lot of times when they apply laws and changes that affect companies, it just kind of goes worldwide because of that same thing. It's just easier for them to not have separate copies that are European Union and then everywhere else kind of thing. It's easier for them to not manufacture copies of a product or a game or software, whatever that is, for one country versus another country. And so since the EU is such a big consumer base, they don't want to lose it. These companies don't want to lose the European Union by getting sanctions put against them since they're not complying with European Union laws. So they just kind of when the European Union does something, a lot of the world follows suit. Aren't you asking companies to support games forever? Isn't that unrealistic? No, we are not asking that at all. We are in favor of publishers ending support for a game whenever they choose. What we are asking for is that they implement an end-of-life plan to modify or patch the game so that it can run on customer systems with no further support from the company being necessary. We agree that it is unrealistic to expect companies to support games indefinitely and do not advocate for that in any way. Additionally, there are already real-world examples of publishers ending support for online-only games in a responsible way, such as Gran Turismo Sport, published by Sony, Knockout City, published by Villan Studios, Mega Man X Dive, published by Capcom, Scrolls/Colors Bane, published by Mohang AB, Duelist, published by Bandai Namco, etc. So, and this is where my earliest misunderstanding of this thing came from. And one of the reasons why when I first heard about this, and I first heard about it through a popular content creator that was against it, and therefore misunderstood what was being said and what was being asked for, I thought this was initially trying to demand that publishers keep these servers open, keep these things open, long past the point where it's financially viable. If it costs them, $10,000 to maintain the servers and they're only making $5,000 or whatever, they were still going to be forced to keep it open. And I thought, no, that's BS. They shouldn't be required to do that once they're losing money. That's not what it's asking for before at all. That's not what it's asking for at all. It is just asking that when they decide they are no longer going to support these games that require access to the internet or require some level of support to keep running, that they patch things, that they change the code, that they alter it so that it will no longer require that support. So that even if they're not supporting the servers at all, people will still be able to play the game. And that just makes sense. Why not? Let people continue to play. The reason why not is because they want you to buy the new one. The reason why not is because they want you to buy the next new game instead of continuing to play this old game because it's not making them money anymore, and this next new game will. That's the most likely reason why they don't want to do this. But it's not asking them to support the servers. It's not asking them to continue to invest any money past the end of life of the game. It's just asking them to put it in the hands of the consumers to make it playable, or to make it playable for the consumers and put it into the hands of the consumers to decide whether or not they want to play it. Aren't games licensed, not sold to customers? The short answer is this is a largely legal gray area depending on the country. In the United States, this is generally the case. In other countries, the law is not clear at all since license agreements cannot override national laws. EULAs cannot override the law. Those laws often consider video games as goods, which may have consumer protections that apply to them. So despite what the license agreement may say, in some countries you are indeed sold your copy of the game license. Some terms still apply, however. For example, you are typically only sold your individual copy of the game license for personal use, not the intellectual property rights to the video game itself. That's fair. You are sold the specific instance of playing the game. You're sold the game. You don't own. If you pay $80 to buy a game, like say you pay, or $70, let's talk about Borderlands 4, you pay $70 to buy Borderlands 4 to play the game. You don't own the rights to Borderlands 4. You're not an invested stock owner in Borderlands 4. Although that would be a cool concept for a game. Everyone that buys a copy of it is owning a stock. That's neat. Neither here nor there. I might postulate that in the future. But you don't have a share, you don't have an ownership share in Borderlands 4. You just own the right to play the game. And despite the fact that they might still have the EULA that says this is merely a license, that doesn't hold in some countries. And I don't think they should be allowed to do that to begin with. I don't think that should be a legal practice for things that are basically sold as goods, whether or not they're saying it is that or not, that they can just sell you a license and then revoke that license anytime they want. That's for subscription service. Okay, I use Adobe Premiere to edit. I'm renting a license to that, but that is understood in the fact that I am paying a monthly fee for that. I am paying monthly to use Adobe, so I am under the understanding immediately that what I am buying is a license to a subscription, a license to use Adobe, and that can be revoked when I'm no longer paying it. That's understood. But when you pay a one-time purchase for a game that you want ownership to, that isn't inherently understood, and that shouldn't be allowed to begin with. Isn't it impractical, if not impossible, to make online-only multiplayer games work without company servers? Not at all. What? This has been seen in the past. Not at all. The majority of online multiplayer games in the past functioned without any company servers and were conducted by the customers privately hosting servers themselves and connecting to each other. Games that were designed this way are still playable today. As to the practicality, this can vary significantly. If a company has designed a game with no thought given towards the possibility of letting users run the game without their support, then yes, this can be a challenging goal to transition to. If a game has been designed with that as an eventual requirement, then this process can be trivial and relatively simple to implement. Another way to look at this is it could be problematic for some games of today, but there's no need for it to be. There's no reason it needs to be for games of the future. Yeah, there are plenty of cases of games being hosted by the people by the consumers themselves. That is just a thing. And when the game is made with that concept, it's a very easy thing to do. I mean, think about like LAN parties almost. That's in the olden days, LAN parties was kind of similar concept. And what this is saying is, yes, well, some modern games that have not considered that or 100% we're never going to let customers host their own servers, it might be a difficult transition. But if game developers are instructed that in the future, all games are going to have to require this at their end of life, then they work around that at the very beginning, so it's not going to be a hard transition. It's going to be a flip of a switch, basically, almost. And with this, when it comes to that, I wouldn't be opposed to, like, okay, let's play nicely with this. Let's have a little bit of compromise. All games that are currently released that are approaching end of life already can be grandfathered into not being required to do this, but games that are not near their end of life, that aren't close to canceling, or are being in development currently or in development in the future, will be required to implement these features. Because if it's a game that is currently in active release, is actively out there, then they can work. They have time. They have time to make this work. And if it's a game that's currently in development, they just need to include it in the initial release. What about large-scale MMORPGs? Is it impossible for customers to run those when the servers are shut down? Not at all. However, limitations can apply. Several MMORPGs that have been shut down have seen server emulators emerge that are capable of hosting thousands of players just on a single-user system. Not all will be scalable, however. For extra demanding video games that require powerful servers, the average user will not have access to the game. The average user will not have access to. The game will not be playable on the same scale as when the developer or publisher was hosting it. That said, that is no excuse for players to not be able to continue playing the game in some form once support ends. So if a server could originally support 5,000 people, but the end user can only support 500, that's still a massive improvement from no one being able to play the game ever again. And on that note, too, so the company decides they're no longer going to support it. Cool. They're not hosting the servers anymore. Just because it would be very difficult for a individual consumer to host the game doesn't mean there's a reason to stop them from trying. Like, hey, we have this game that's going to require massive servers to be able to host it, so we just decided we're not even going to give you the opportunity to try. No, like, if someone wants to try, someone wants to make it work, you no longer support this game, you're no longer making money from this game, and someone wants to try to make it work, maybe there's someone out there that's so dedicated to the game and has the money that they're going to rent a massive server farm and they're going to make it work. Who knows? Either way, let them try. There's no reason not to. Hey, you might fail so you don't get to try even though it doesn't affect us at all. Screw you. Can you really expect all features in an online-only game to work when support ends? Not necessarily. We understand that some features can be impractical for an end user to attain if running a server on an end-user system. That said, we have also seen the ability to continue playing the game in some form as a reasonable demand from companies that customers have given money to. There's a large difference between a game missing some features versus being completely unplayable in any form. Yeah, exactly. Maybe not everything's going to work, and they don't expect everything to work. But it gives the consumer the opportunity to try to make it work as well as possible. Wouldn't what you're asking ban online-only games? Not at all. In fact, nothing we are seeking would interfere with any business activity whatsoever while the game was actively being supported. The regulations we are seeking would only appear when companies decide to end support for games. At the time, they would need to be converted to have either offline or private hosting modes. Until then, companies could continue running any games any way they see fit. Yeah, it's not asking for them to make any changes while the game is actively playing. It's not asking them to say, hey, you also have to have this version of the game that I can play privately on my own system, even though it's an online-only game. It's just saying once the game is no longer being supported, provide the ability for me to continue playing it. Provide the ability for me to continue playing it even without access to your servers, even without access to any of your support. But it goes into effect once the game has been end-of-lifed, once the game has reached its end of life. And with that, I imagine there would need to be some legal determination of what is considered end of life of a game. Because if a company really wanted to be a jerk, they can just say, oh, well, no, we haven't end-of-life this game. We're just shelving it temporarily. We're just putting it on a shelf, and we'll come back to it later, but we still maintain this one tiny server that only our developers can get into, and blah, blah, blah. So it's not dead. It's not dead. It's just shelved. It's just taking a little vacation. So there would need to be some legal definition put in there to describe what is considered end of life of a game. Isn't this unreasonable to ask this of free-to-play games? Well, free-to-play games are free for users to try. They're supported by microtransactions, which customers spend money on. When a publisher ends a free-to-play game without providing any recourse to the players, they are effectively robbing those that brought features for the game. Hence, they should be accountable to making the game playable in some fashion once support ends. Our proposed regulations would have no impact on non-commercial games, are 100% free, however. Cool. So, if a free-to-play game that relies on microtransactions for its income gets shelved, they need to provide some way for players to continue to play that game because players have invested money into that game. But if it's a completely free game with no microtransactions or nothing, this wouldn't affect them. If it's a game that has brought in no money, it's just some guy made a game, posted it online, it requires the server, no longer wants to support it, he's not going to be affected by this. I like that. Also, I've been kind of affected by this in the past, too, because there are games I'll admit I'm guilty of falling for some of the microtransaction-y games and the freemium games. And there have been games I have bought in the past, like the Dungeon Keeper mobile game. Dungeon Keeper was one of my favorite games as a kid, so when the mobile game came out, I bought it. I spent a good bit of money on it, and now it's no longer playable. So all that money I spent to speed up time or to get this or to get that has been wasted. The Zombieland Double Tap game was another game that I put money into. I loved that game, put money into, and now because it lost access to the cloud, all those I can still get on the game and technically play it, but last time I checked, it didn't save any of my progress, and I don't have access to any of those purchases that I made. So I effectively that money was lost. Isn't the law on this already settled? It mostly is within the United States, but not in many other countries. Many existing laws are not written for a scenario where the seller destroys the product sold to the customer after the point of sale, since this is not something that normally happens in the real world. There is no button that Craftsman can press that destroys your hammer, and for the most part, as far as I know, there's no button that Chevy can press. Why am I saying that word wrong? Press that disables your truck because they don't want you to use it anymore. The fact that there is so much ambiguity on this practice is part of why we're pushing so many legal avenues. Wouldn't what you're asking force the company to give up its intellectual property rights? Isn't that unreasonable? No, we would not require the company to give up any of its intellectual property rights, only allow players to continue running the game they purchased. In no way would that involve the publisher forfeiting any intellectual property rights. What this is saying is they're not giving up the IP. If they create, if there is a Sonic Online game and Sega decides they no longer want to support the Sonic Online game and this law passes, this initiative works, and the law passes, and they're forced to allow consumers to continue to play and make playable the Sonic Online game, Sega isn't giving up their copyright on Sonic. It's no longer public domain. It's not like it's all of a sudden public domain. It's still owned by Sega. Sega still owns Sonic. There's no change there. It's just that particular game must be made playable for the consumers that own it. Aren't companies unable to do this due to license agreements they make with other companies that expire, like with music, other software products, brands, etc.? No, while those can be problems for the industry, those would only prohibit the company from selling additional copies of the game once their license expires. They would not prevent existing buyers from continuing to use the game they have already paid for. That, again, makes sense. Like, the license doesn't say that this software has to be, or this piece of music has to be ripped out from all games after this time. The license just like, hey, during this time period, you have the right to sell this game with our thing, but it's already there. For instance, like if look on Amazon Prime, a lot of times I buy a lot of movies and stuff through Amazon Prime, and there have been cases where Amazon through Amazon Video, where Amazon has lost the license to those videos, but I'm still allowed to watch the movie because it's already been purchased. Amazon's not making more money on it. It's already been purchased by me. I'm still allowed to stream it, even though anyone that has not bought it can't buy it now, because Amazon no longer has the license. Wouldn't this be a security risk for video game companies? Not at all. And asking for a game to be operable, we're not demanding all internal code and documentation, just a functional copy of the game. It would be no more of a security risk than selling the game in the first place. Yeah, they're not asking for like a backdoor into the servers. They're not asking for special like security info that allows them to get past the game. They're asking for them to make the game playable without the need for those servers, which means they just have to alter the code in a way that if they're worried about like, hey, there's this special backdoor code that gets on the servers, one, that code is there when you have the game and it's still like in its lifespan. So if someone really wanted to dig into the code, they could find that anyways. There's not going to be any change of code here that would make it more risky to have the game out there. It likely would make it less risky because now it's not accessing servers. It's not accessing anything that's owned by the company that could be used to pivot into the company. It's just asking for the game. Yes. Won't asking for this harm developers. It is very unlikely and is far more likely to benefit them. Many video game developers have voiced their dissatisfaction with having a game they spent years of their lives working on destroyed by the publisher, being powerless to stop it. By having laws requiring the game to function, it would help their work and legacy endure. It is possible a small number of developers could find new requirements problematic if they were unprepared for them, but we anticipate that if implemented, there would be a significant lead time in giving developers time to prepare for changes. Yeah, so one, grandfather in older games potentially, just playable. That could grandfather in older games that have already been end of life or very nearly approaching their end of life. And then most of the time these laws pass, it's not like, okay, on this day, this has to be in place. It's usually you have X amount of time to make this true. Everyone must be in compliance by this future date, a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever in the future. So, yeah, well, If they said on this date this needs to pass and everyone needs to be in compliance, that could screw over smaller developers, but not really if they do it the right way. And look at when it comes to like publishers screwing over the game developers. Look at what happened with Helldivers 2 and Sony. Helldivers Arrowhead Studios, as far as all public reporting has said, had nothing to do with the decision to make you log into a Sony account. But a decision made by the publisher reflected really badly on Arrowhead until they put out their announcements and really affected the playing of Helldivers 2. And this is kind of a similar situation. If Arrowhead wanted to continue supporting Helldivers 2 or any other game, any other company that's go through a publisher, wanted to continue supporting it, but the publisher said, no, we're stopping all support of it, and they have the right to the game, basically, they have the right to publish the game, the developer's kind of screwed because they can't do anything now because the publisher said, we're not supporting this anymore. This would stop that. Won't this bankrupt video game companies? It is extremely unlikely. The cost associated with implementing this requirement can be very small, if not trivial. Furthermore, it often takes a company with large resources at its disposal to even construct games of this nature in the first place. Small developers with constrained budgets are less likely to be contributing to this problem. Yeah, I mean, Blizzard isn't going to go bankrupt if they decide to release a World of Warcraft 2 and end-of-life World of Warcraft and make it publicly playable make it playable without the need for their servers. That's not. These big companies aren't going to suffer from it, and these small companies probably aren't having these live service games that are hosted on such big servers and blah 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 to begin with because they don't have the funds to make that happen anyways. Does this mean publishers will have to release copies of the game to ban players for hacking or disruptive behavior? Not while the game is being supported. All of our measures are focused on what happens to the game once support ends. So if disruptive players in an online-only game become banned, but regular players may continue playing with active support, then they would not be entitled to run the game offline until support officially ended, which could be many years later. So it's not gonna interfere. Basically, since everything they're asking for goes into effect when the game has been end of life, when the game has been shelved, when the game is no longer being supported by the developers and the publisher, there is nothing that would really benefit banned players. And even then, if it was said, no, you have to provide an offline only version of this game to begin with, those banned players can't get on the online account anyways and can't access the online servers anyways, so it's still not going to be a problem for the players that aren't hacking and aren't cheating. Isn't what you're asking for impossible due to existing licensing agreements publishers have with other companies? For existing video games, it's possible that some being sold cannot have an end-of-life plan as they were created with necessary software that the publisher doesn't have permission to redistribute. Games like these would need to be either retired or grandfathered in before new law went into effect. For the European Citizens Initiative in particular, even if passed, its effects would not be retroactive. So there you go. The effects are not retroactive. All published games, as far as it's seeming, are grandfathered in. This affects future games. So while it may not be possible to prevent some existing games from being destroyed, if the law were to change, future games could be designed with an end-of-life plan and stop this trend. And this would also require those people creating the software to plan around that. Because if you're creating a software that is licensed and would stop this end-of-life plan from going into effect, and now companies are forced to have an end-of-life plan for the games, they're not going to buy your software. They're not going to license your software. They're going to buy or license the software that allows them to have an end-of-life plan. So this is also going to make those people, people that are supporting these games through extra software, adjust their model too. And it can even have an effect there where it's like this only goes into effect during end of life. Doesn't the wording on the European Citizens Initiative need to be more specific? The wording on the European Citizens Initiative is very intentional and is meant to solve the problem of video games being destroyed while remaining flexible enough to give publishers and developers as much freedom as possible. If the initiative passes, it'll be the EU Commission that decides the final language, not us. In light of this, it is best to keep the demand as simple as possible to minimize any chance of misinterpretation. Not only can specifics be disregarded by the EU Commission, but the more there are, the more that can take away focus from the primary problem, which is that of sold video games being intentionally destroyed. I agree with this, and I've seen arguments to the other side of, oh, this is too broad, this is too vague, so it can be done in a very bad way. One, I'll get more into why that is not the case when I go over how ECI works. But two, if you give a very strict set of demands to someone and say, you need to implement this and this and this and this and this right now, they are more likely to say no. They are more likely to say no. This is, and not say, hey, not counteroffer, not say, oh, how about this, or we'll change this around. They're more likely to say no. So imagine if you're trying to pass a law. You saw a spike in accidents, and you saw this spike in accidents to be related to the fact that there are more drivers that are under a certain age and immature and whatever, and you wanted to change that. You could propose the law that the brain is done developing at this age, so I want to raise the age where people can drive to this age. That way we can ensure everyone has a properly developed brain, and now it's safer for everyone. And that can be seen as a very restrictive law because now you're pushing that age back to a hardline date or hardline age that restricts a large portion of the drivers, and the legislators can say no, that's overly restrictive. We're just going to kick this back. This is way too crazy. Or you can say, I want to propose a change in regulations of driving that creates a more strict procedure for determining who is allowed to get a driver's license based on a stricter set of regulations and tests. And now the legislators can say, or more likely look like that. It's like, you know what? Yeah, there are a lot of accidents, and a lot of these accidents are coming from people that are overage or underage or under a certain age. And we do need to make the driving tests more strict. We do need to make legislation that requires a stricter regulation on who can get their driver's license because more people are getting hurt. but it's not as aggressive, and it's not going to, get people to immediately turn away outright. It shows an ability to compromise. It shows an understanding that the issue is nuanced and allows people with more expertise to decide where they want to set those strict hard lines. Won't this consumer action result in the end of live service games? No, the market demand and profitability of these games means the video games industry has an ongoing interest in selling these. Since our proposals do not interfere with existing business models, these types of games can remain just as profitable, ensuring their survival. The only difference is future ones will need to be designed with an end-of-life build once support finally ends. This is not difficult to have done if from the design phase onward, if this is not difficult to have if done from the design phase onward, and any costs to it are far outweighed by potential sales in Australia and or the EU. Basically, no, the live service games will still exist. They just need to have a plan to stop being a live service when they are no longer going to support the game. You can continue to have your live service games, just have a plan for when you're no longer having live service on them. Simple. Do these efforts impact single-player or multiplayer games? Most, if not all, countries have no separate laws regarding governing the sales of video games based on whether they are single-player or multiplayer. The primary distinction under the law is typically about whether the games were sold as an indefinite purchase or as a subscription service with a clear end date. We do not see it as productive to introduce new laws on this distinction where none currently exist. Thus, this would impact both game types. From a technical standpoint, multiplayer games can often be preserved with a comparable amount of effort as single-player ones. It is a deliberate decision by publishers when they choose not to. Furthermore, an increasing number of video games blend both single-player and multiplayer modes together, making this distinction too nebulous for many titles to have effective protections if the two modes are treated separately. Effectively, it's saying, like, whether or not the game is single-player or multiplayer, it's going to take the same amount of effort to end of life it and give it a offline only version, or a version that doesn't require the live service, doesn't require you to connect to the the developer, the publisher's servers. So trying to create an individual nuance of what defines single player and multiplayer and et cetera, because Call of Duty, you could play it single player, you could play 100% single player, there's campaign mode, everything, but it's also multiplayer, so that kind of falls into that area. There's a lot of games that are similar to that. Elden Ring and all the Souls-like games, there's a multiplayer component to them, but it's largely single player, blah blah blah, et cetera, like that. Basically, since it's going to be basically equally difficult, whether it's a multiplayer or a single-player game, they're not trying to further distinguish between that and just say everyone needs to do this kind of thing. And that's the end of the FAQ. The European Citizens Initiative, effectively, if the initiative gets enough support, which is 1 million EU citizens, 1 million European Union citizens, which means, unfortunately, to the people that are watching that are not part of the European Union, you can't support this directly, but you can support it the same way I'm doing it, by talking about it and getting more people talking about it so that it gets more publicity. But if it gets 1 million citizens, it starts a timeline. It has 12 months to get those 1 million EU citizens to support it. Those statements of support have to be verified. You have to be like a European citizen. You have to be an actual person. After it gets those 1 million EU citizen supports, there is a 3-month period where they have to get those statements of support verified, grouped by nationality, and sent to verification. Then the initiative gets submitted. After that case, you have 3 months to submit the initiative to the commission, along with the information on the support and funding for the initiative, and then starts the process of where you will get an answer. So within 1 month, you meet a representative of the commission, and that allows you to explain the issues raised in detail. So this is here where any ambiguity in the initiative can be hashed out. If a member of the commission is confused by what you might mean specifically about something, you have this opportunity to explain, this is what we mean. So people that are saying, oh, well, this is too ambiguous, this isn't hardline enough, this is confusing, and this might lead to a snowball effect of them taking it incredibly wrong and doing the wrong thing, this is your opportunity to fix this. You meet with someone and explain, a human being, and explain the issue as clearly as you possibly can. Within 3 months, you'll have the opportunity to present your initiative at a public hearing at the European Parliament. Parliament may also hold a debate in a full plenary session, which could lead to adopting a resolution related to your issue. So now, within 3 months, you have a hearing at the European Parliament. So now there's even more people that you can more clearly explain this issue to, and more people that might have confusions about any of the ambiguity or what do you mean by this, or maybe they're a bunch of old guys that don't understand video games and live service games and blah, blah, blah. Now you can explain to them, this is what this means. Clear up the ambiguity. Just because the annex itself, the description of it itself, might have ambiguity for the purposes of nuance, this is your time to clarify it. Clarify it. My God, why am I talking so bad today? This is your chance to clarify it. So all those arguments about, well, it's too ambiguous, this is when that gets fixed. Within 6 months, the Commission will spell out what action, if any, it will propose in response to your initiative and its reasons for taking or not taking action. This response will be in the form of communication formally adopted by the College of Commissioners and published in all official EU languages. You meet with a representative of the Commission who will explain in more detail its decision regarding your initiative. So, within 6 months of this initiative being approved, you will have spoken to an individual commissioner, individual member of the commission, and been able to explain what this is in more detail and answer any questions they have. And then you will have been able to talk before the European Parliament and further explain it and answer more questions. And then at the end of that, you will get an answer. But now the Parliament is aware that at least 1 million people are heavily vested in this and care about this and know that it is an issue. Are they going to do anything about it? Who's to say? But it provides the opportunity for change, and that is a big deal. And it provides ample opportunity for ambiguity to be cleared up so that it is not a problem. So someone who's arguing that this is too ambiguous or this can be interpreted the wrong way, that gets cleared up as part of the process. What's next? Legislation. If the Commission considers legislation as an appropriate response to your initiative, it will start preparing a formal proposal. This can require preparatory steps like public consultations, impact assessments, etc. Once adopted by the Commission, the proposal is submitted to the European Parliament and the Council, or in some cases only to the Council, which will need to adopt it for it to become law. So basically, this can end in a proposal that goes forward to the European Parliament and the Council, or sometimes only the Council, which adopt it into law. Other actions, the Commission is not obliged to propose legislation. Even if it responds positively, the most appropriate follow-up to an initiative may be a non-legislative in nature. There are a range of other measures that may be more suitable. That's fair. Like maybe this doesn't require legislation. Maybe this is something that can be handled at a lower level, or this can be handled in another way. Follow-up, the European Parliament may also assess the measures taken by the Commission. There you go. So that's how the ECI works, and that's why this is a big deal. If you believe that game developers should not be able to rip a game from you the moment they decide to stop supporting it, even if it costs them a negligible amount of money, sign the initiative. The initiative will be linked down there. You have to be a European citizen to do it. It is deadlined on the 31st of July, 2025. I'm recording this on the 2nd of July. You have 29 days to get to this point and get it there. And it is so very close. It is currently at 825,107 signatures out of the 1 million goal. Post-recording note, it is very likely that by the time this video actually posts, the initiative might have completed. When I recorded the video, it still needed 150,000 signatures, and I recorded it less than a day ago, and it seems like it's very, very close at this moment to succeeding. On that note, though, it's still a very good idea to sign the initiative as one. Those signatures need to be verified. So if some of those signatures turn out to be fake or false or somehow not verifiable, then it might push it back to the other end. And the more people that sign this initiative, the better. The more people that sign this initiative, the more likely it is to actually succeed in Parliament. Sign the initiative, get this into legislation, get this into the Commission, get this into Parliament, get this changed so that game developers and publishers cannot rob you of your purchases anymore. When I initially saw this, I saw it through the spectrum of someone that disagreed with it, and I didn't put too much effort into it, and I didn't even look into it that more. One, because I'm not a European citizen, so I can't sign it, and I didn't want to discuss it because it just like there's times when people popped in my stream and said, "What do you think about this?" And I was just like, I don't want to discuss this because this is too embroiled in drama, and that seems what this is about. But looking into it more, this is important. It should not be about the drama. It should be about the cause. The drama should not be the primary aspect of the conversation surrounding this. The goal should be. So, again, I'm going to try to moderate any comments in the comment section that are specifically about the drama or that are getting overly aggressive. It's not about that. It is about the cause. I don't care what this person said or that person said or how this person's a big dum-dum and no, this person's just a silly person and because of they said this and blah, blah, blah. I don't care about that. I care about the cause. That is the most important thing here. And on that note, this is something that I personally believe in. It's separate. This is what I'm about to say is something that I personally believe in and think is important, and it's one of the reasons why I don't discuss certain topics in my YouTube content or on stream. Just because your favorite content creator says something does not make it true. Just because your favorite content creator believes something a certain way does not mean that that is the most correct way to believe it. One, the human experience is nuanced. People have different backgrounds. People have different things that they believe and believe are okay with. So there, in a lot of cases, there is no true right or wrong when it comes to like certain issues of should this company be allowed to do this or that company be allowed to do this, because it is nuanced based on personal belief, personal background. Take everything someone says with a grain of salt. If someone is speaking very, very confidently on something, and especially if it's something that they aren't an expert in, that they are not an actual expert in, take what they say with a grain of salt. Do not form your opinions based around your favorite influencer. Don't form your opinions based around what someone you like thinks because, well, they believe this, so I should believe it too. Form your opinions based on the facts. So if someone speaks very confidently about a topic and it's not something that they are an expert in, like if you have a biologist coming to you, if you have someone that's has a PhD in regenerative medicine or biomedical engineering, or something like that, and they are talking to you about biomedical engineering or regenerative medicine, you can believe what they say. If Neil deGrasse Tyson says something about space, there's a good chance that he is right. But if Neil deGrasse Tyson starts talking about politics, one, politics is nuanced. Politics is not objective truth. It is bias based on morality and personal upbringing and personal beliefs and ethics and shit like that. So if Neil deGrasse Tyson starts talking about politics, you don't have to believe him. If he starts talking about space, you believe Neil deGrasse Tyson. But don't believe him just because he's smart and you like him. Just because someone is intelligent does not make them an expert on everything. I consider myself to be a very intelligent person, but I would not have the audacity to go explain things confidently and say I am right 100% and everyone else is wrong because I believe this about a topic that I'm not an expert in. So if you have your favorite influencer, your favorite content creator, your favorite Twitter personality, your favorite politician, your favorite whoever, talking to you about something and explaining to you about something that they are not an expert in, and explaining it very, very confidently and saying they are right, take it with a grain of salt and do the research yourself and figure out the truth about yourself and form your own opinion based on what you believe is right, not what you are told by some influencer is correct. With that, again, sign the initiative if you can. If you can sign the initiative, sign it down here. I also have a change.org petition that is nowhere near as effective as an initiative. That is for the stop of the abuse and misuse of patent laws in video games. The goal of that, change.org doesn't have the same thing where like it merits a response where they have to respond kind of thing. But the goal of getting that bigger is to get more people talking about it, to hopefully get it more in the public discourse. So maybe people that with more influence than I can will start talking about it. Other than that, check out the other content over there. Bye.